Welcome to Living Your Greatness. Each episode, we bring on great people to inspire you to achieve your greatness. We discuss topics all related to health and wellness. Listen to world-class stories, learn valuable lessons, and turn knowledge into action. It is now time for you to unlock your inner greatness. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Living Your Greatness. This is your host, Ben Mummy, and today we have a new guest to the show, and his name is Luke Alexander. For those of you that don't know Luke, he's the CEO and the president of Newcore Gold. He brings extensive resource sector experience, knowledge, and contacts to Newcore, particularly in West Africa. He has raised billions of dollars and structured deals for major mining companies while advising some of the world's top institutional investment funds. So Luke, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to have you today on Living Your Greatness.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ben. Great to be here.
Awesome, Luke. Let's kind of get rolling here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you spend your formative years growing up? And what inspired you to become the president and CEO of Newcore Gold?
So I've actually lived across Canada and spent a number of years in London in the UK. I was actually born in Nova Scotia, but grew up in Montreal. So all of my elementary and high school were in Montreal, as well as CEGEP, and then went to university on the West Coast, and then actually lived in Toronto for a few years on and off, working with different investment banks in Toronto, including both Bank of Montreal as well as TD. That was after I graduated from business school. And then from there, I got transferred over to London, where I spent 12 years working on the investment banking side of the business before moving to Vancouver about 5 years ago. So I've lived right across Canada and then spent a number of years in the UK as well.
Awesome. Cool, Luke. Well, thanks for giving us a little bit of background about yourself. It's always interesting to hear how someone got started and how they got where they are today. And it was actually pretty interesting too to hear, as kind of Luke said, you know, he's originally from Montreal. And it turns out actually one thing that we were able to connect on was we're actually from the same area of Montreal, which is the West Island. So it was such a small world a couple of weeks ago when I actually met you at the Metals Investor Forum in Toronto, because it's not often that you see two West Islanders at a conference there, right? Something that stood out though, Luke, when we were actually having dinner together, is you stood out as a person who is confident, smart, humble, and pretty well connected. And I understand that you are a big family man. So what advice would you give aspiring young fathers to have work and family life balance?
One of the things on that side is ultimately prioritizing your time. I think as you grow within your career, there ends up being a lot more demands on your time. And one thing I've kind of realized and started to appreciate more is, you know, what value is the meeting that someone's requesting, or the lunch or the dinner? You know, is that creating real value in terms of, you know, the business that I'm running, as well as, you know, my own personal time? And I find when you start to look at, you know, every hour of the day, and whether it's having a coffee with someone or a lunch or a meeting, and you start to look at that, you know, time slot and whether that's really adding value for the company that you're working for or for you personally, and you start to really be critical about those, you know, that allocation of time, I think you can ultimately end up freeing a lot of hours in the day that can sometimes be a real waste of time. And if you can, you know, free those hours up to spend with your family, then I think that's ultimately a real benefit from a personal perspective. For me anyways, that's a real benefit. The other thing is a lot of stuff can get done early in the morning. I mean, I deal still a lot with people in Europe, in Toronto, and around the world. And, you know, the old expression, early bird catches the worm. I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, I can get a lot of work done before, you know, the family's even out of bed. So being disciplined about getting up and getting lots of work done, I think, is the other way that you can free up hours in the day to spend with family.
I definitely agree in terms of time management. I think if there's certain things that you value, whether that's family, whether that's work, or whether that's even like, let's say a personal goal, like even exercise, you could always make time, right? But it's obviously managing that time and kind of like you said, like looking them as kind of time slots of like transactions, right? Like it's a relationship that you have. So if it's really important to you, and if you're trying to become whatever you're trying to become in each of those areas, you really can do it, right? So it's having that mindset approach. And you touched on at the end there, also having that discipline, right? Discipline of, if you have to move things around because it means so much, to spend more time with your family by, getting up earlier. These are all things that you could do, in terms of habits, right? So I appreciate that advice, Luke. And something that I want to move to now is I'm actually aware that you started your career as an investment banker. In 2008, you were managing director at GMP Securities in London. You helped many major resource projects in West Africa. So you are someone that I find it stands out to me, especially when I was listening to your presentation in Toronto there. You were very knowledgeable about this jurisdiction. So for the benefit of my listeners, what can you tell us about West Africa's mining industry? I know gold mining has always been extremely important.
Yeah, so West Africa is a very large mining jurisdiction, especially in the gold sector. A number of mid-cap and major companies operating right across West Africa. Our project at Newcore, the Enchi project, is in Ghana. So maybe I'll just touch on Ghana, which obviously sits within West Africa. So Ghana is Africa's largest gold producer. It's actually the sixth largest gold producer globally, just behind Canada. But interestingly, it's obviously a relatively small country when you compare it to Canada from that perspective. But with that, you've got a huge amount of skilled labor in Ghana, and that's a real benefit for us at Newcore. But it also, Ghana acts as a hub for all of West Africa because it's such a politically safe jurisdiction, as well as from a security perspective, it's very safe. You've got a lot of companies, service companies, who use Ghana as a hub for all of West Africa. So whether it's drilling companies or assay labs, they will, have their headquarters based in Ghana, and then they will service a number of other countries around West Africa from Ghana. So, from that perspective, it's a great jurisdiction to be operating in. In terms of, one of the things tying it to, investment and how to approach investments. When you look at Ghana, it's currently got 4 of the top 10 largest gold producers operating in country, with significant operations in country. Newmont, for example, they're the largest gold producer on the planet. They're in the process of investing another $750 to $850 million into Ghana, into their Ahafo project, which sits to the north of us. That will take their exposure from 14% of global production to 20% of global production coming from Ghana. I mean, I think that speaks for itself in terms of what a great jurisdiction it is that you've got the largest gold producer on the planet willing to have 1/5 of their production coming from Ghana as a jurisdiction. So, West Africa, lots of gold discoveries, lots of gold being produced. But specifically within West Africa, I think Ghana is a real standout, for all of those reasons that I just talked about.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, I think you touched on a good point there, especially about about the big 4, majors that are there in like the jurisdiction. And that obviously says a lot, right? It says that they've had a big history. Something that also makes me think about too, about this jurisdiction is it also offers a lot of employment, right? Which is really good for like the communities there. And so I think that's another as well jurisdiction kind of aspect that's positive for it, right?
Yeah, and then support from the government as well. So, I mean, you've got 2 dedicated mining universities within Ghana. And Ghana actually ends up being an exporter of talent across West Africa and around the world. So, a number of the geologists that we currently have working for us, they've worked all over Africa, and we're quite keen to get back home and back to Ghana where they can be close to family members. So in terms of, again, jurisdiction, being able to attract that high quality talent that has worked in other jurisdictions but ultimately want to be back home is a real benefit. Another couple things that I would just highlight, if you look at at some of the initiatives that the government of Ghana has had, they've actually just recently set up a minerals investment and income fund called MIF, where they've allocated $200 million to invest directly in projects across Ghana, across West Africa, as well as investing in the small scale mining sector to basically institutionalize a lot of these small scale mines and provide them with capital to obviously advance those projects further. So that's just another small initiative that really shows the support of the government and how important the gold mining sector is for Ghana. I mean, it currently represents about 10% of the GDP for the country, as well as it represents a huge portion of the foreign dollars that are coming into Ghana. So real benefits from that perspective.
Thanks for adding those other points. And something that I want to move to, Luke, is, I've only had one other CEO on, and that was Mike Connor from Vizsla Silver. And so usually when I bring on CEOs, especially in like the mining sector, especially in terms of a junior company, I like to obviously, talk and kind of learn about, their projects or where they are. But most importantly, I like to get a better understanding of like the journey of taking that project and really becoming world-class, because it's not easy, right? It's a very competitive market and also a very high risk market. So the journey of a mining company from exploration to sale is not easy. It takes someone with vision, knowledge, capital, and especially social skills to navigate the hurdles and the pitfalls in order to move their projects forward to be successful. So how do you visualize the journey of a world-class mining entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I spent the first 15 years of my career, as you highlighted, on the investment banking side of the business. 12 years I was in London as a senior partner at GMP Securities Europe. I helped start up the trading desk at TD. I helped start up the sales trading desk at National Bank in London. And I was essentially covering all the big global natural resource funds out of the UK and Europe, advising different ASX, TSX, London listed mining companies on different transactions around the world, working with executive teams at those different companies. And, what I really learned through that kind of experience is the real successful companies have three key things. They've got a great asset. They've got really strong support from the capital markets, as well as they've got a team with a proven track record. So those, I think, are three critical ingredients that make a successful company, and that ultimately, are the ingredients that successful mining entrepreneurs look for and have within their companies. I guess so for us specifically, our project in Ghana, the Enchi project, it's a district scale exploration asset. We've got very good neighbors along trend from us, so very large 5 million ounce plus deposits at Chirano, at Bibiani, Newmont's about 150 kilometers to the north along the Sefwi-Bibiani belt. So we're in an area that has known and proven large deposits. So that speaks to my point about having a great asset with district scale potential. In terms of the team, obviously I've spent 15 years of my career working with and advising world-class mining companies. Our board has a proven track record. Our chairman, Doug Forrester, he's been behind a number of very successful companies. Our VP Exploration, he's got over 30 years of experience looking at these greenstone hosted deposits around the world. Same with our VP Corp Dev Investor Relations, has worked both on the corporate side as well as the private equity and investment banking side of the business. And then crucial is our team in country. They've worked on this project on and off for 20 years, so know all of the stakeholders incredibly well, have worked up and down the belt as geologists working for different companies and across Africa. So having, a very strong team with a proven track record is the second key ingredient. And then lastly, you can have the best asset in the world and the greatest team, but if you don't have the money to push that forward and advance the project, then it's a bit of a moot point. So we're also very fortunate to have strong support from the capital markets. I mean, we've grown our institutional ownership from 0 to 40% over the last 2 years. These are tier one, institutional investors who are primarily focused on the mining and precious metals sector, who recognize the district scale opportunity that we've got within Newcore. And then also, having good, strong support from the investment banking community is very helpful as well. So we've currently got 5, investment banks out of Toronto who cover us from a research perspective, who monitor the company closely, and having that support from the capital markets, both institutional investors as well as investment banking community, obviously really helps us move the project forward in terms of raising the capital that's required to obviously aggressively drill on the project to add ounces.
Awesome, Luke. So, that was a lot of value there. I think you just gave people in terms of, having like the assets as well as jurisdiction, having that team, and then as well as having that capital support, right? Which it sounds like you guys have. And I even noticed too, like being chosen to go to the Metals Investor Forum, those are also companies, all those companies are very well vetted, by newsletter writers. And I know Brian Lenny, who I've actually had on the podcast, he actually had you guys as one of his companies that he wanted to feature. So I think those 3 things that you just explained is definitely very important for a world-class mining entrepreneur or even company. And something that I want to target on is in terms of assets, in terms of actually having the goods, right? There's one thing of having that like story that's going to sound good and then it could play out, but actually having what's in the ground. So something that I want to move to is drilling is one of the most important but expensive stages in mineral exploration. It is drilling that locates and defines economic mineralization, and drilling is the ultimate test for all the ideas, theories, and predictions. So how does Newcore Gold plan on proving the value with drilling?
Yeah, so couple points there. One is there's obviously the exploration stage where you explore and then move it towards putting out a resource. There's then also the stage where you start to wrap economics around that resource, whether that's in the form of a PEA or PFS or full feasibility study. So a couple of things there. So from our perspective at Newcore, we've got a 43-101 compliant resource on our project, which outlines a 1.4 million ounce resource. But we've also put out a PEA, which is an economic study that then looks at, okay, what would this potentially look like as a project, and what is the value of that project once you get independent engineers to wrap economics around that. So two elements there. In terms of the exploration side and the current resource, so on the back of putting out that 1.4 million ounce resource in June of 2021, we are continuing to aggressively drill on our project. So we've got currently the largest ever drill program happening, a total of 90,000 meters. An additional 70,000 meters will go into future resource updates and economic studies. And really our focus is a multi-pronged exploration approach. Because it's such a large drill program, we do have the flexibility to kind of focus on lots of different aspects from a drilling perspective. So we're looking at, expanding all of the existing resource areas. So stepping out along strike from the pits that were outlined and that capture the gold within that 1.4 million ounce resource. So stepping out 50 to 100 meters at a time, continuing to intercept mineralized material with the goal that when we put out a updated resource, it will start to capture those additional mineralization and grow the overall size of the resource. So we've been adding significant mineralization along trend at all 4 of our current resource areas. Second thing is we've also gone back to previously drill tested areas that had limited historical drilling done, and we've done follow-on drilling and looking to continue to, again, add mineralization, get enough drill density done within those areas that you can then wrap a pit around those ounces and add them to your resource. We're also, for the first time ever, looking to drill below 125 meters. So what you see with these greenstone hosted deposits along the Sefwi-Bibiani belt, including Chirano, Bibiani, and Ahafo to the north of us, is where they increase in grade and grow in sizes as you start to drill deeper. So for the first time ever, we're starting to drill below, and with this program, we've been drilling below 125 meters, and we've started to identify some of that high grade that we see at other deposits along trend from us. And then the last thing is, again, we've identified 25 targets across our overall project, of which we've only to date drilled on 9 of them. But as part of that, we've made 3 new discoveries, all of those highlighted this year. So what that does by, on a first pass drilling, starting to make some new discoveries, it starts to highlight the overall size and scale potential of the project. So that's another area that we've focused on from an exploration perspective. And then as we get all of those results back, that will then feed into an updated resource. So from an exploration perspective, that's been our focus, and that's kind of similar to what other companies will focus on depending on the size of their exploration program and the ability to, look at a multi-pronged approach. And then the second thing I'd just say is we've also put out a PEA, an economic study, which wraps some economics around the project. So what we outlined within that, and that was released in June of 2021, was a very simple open pit heap leach project. One of the real benefits of a heap leach project is that it's lower CapEx to basically bring that into production. And there was very good economics within that. Looking at an $1,850 gold price, you're looking at an after-tax NPV of 302 million. So that's another thing that I would just kind of highlight and look at as an investor is having drill results is one thing, but is there a resource that ultimately, wraps pits around those drill results? And then beyond that, has there been an economic study done that really looks at what is the value of the project and what could the project potentially look like if it were to go into production at some stage? Because those are meaningful de-risking events as a company moves along the process of getting towards production.
Thanks for sharing those different kind of phases as well as elements, of that exploration process. I do feel that there are a lot of investors, that maybe don't have, a geology background or they don't have much mining specific experience, but they do know in terms of, jurisdictions or following the people. So anyways, it was nice to kind of get that in-depth answer. And something that I want to move to here, Luke, is something that stood out to me when I was listening to your presentation your company has actually skin in the game in terms of like your management team. I believe it is 27%. Anytime I make any type of investment decision, that's one checkbox that I look for. In the whole investing world, it becomes important to always look at a promoter holdings and insider buying and so on. You want to try and understand the incentive that management has. You want to make sure that the management team has something at stake. So that being said, a question that I have for you, even though this is one important element, what are other mental models that investors can apply in like the junior mining space to become a better investor?
Yeah, so I think your comment and point about having skin in the game is an important one. The other aspect that I would just add to that is if you can work out whether management has actually bought the stock or whether they've been essentially given free stock, because there are a number of instances where promoters will get really inexpensive stock and ultimately can't lose. Whereas for us, we've written checks alongside investors on for me all of the financings that have been done since I joined, which I think adds another element of alignment, is when you're investing alongside other shareholders from that perspective, as opposed to getting the free stock when a company is formed. So looking at that, I think is another element that I would add to your skin in the game comment. I think we've touched on a few of the other things. Obviously, institutional investors who are focused on the sector. When you see a high concentration of those types of investors on a share registry, I think that's another de-risking a company, because those types of investors, obviously that's what they're doing all day, every day, is analyzing different companies and coming up with the ones that have the best potential to ultimately succeed. So I think that institutional ownership is another aspect. And we touched on it as well. I mean, what other companies are operating within the jurisdiction that you're looking to invest in? Again, back to Ghana, we've got 4 of the top 10 largest gold producers on the planet. I mean, if you look at Newmont, you could imagine the size of their political risk team as well as their security team, who are analyzing jurisdictions around the world and deciding where to allocate their capital. So when you get a high concentration of mid-cap and major companies operating within a certain jurisdiction, whether that's Canada, US, Papua New Guinea, Ghana, I mean, that I think again is a de-risking aspect when you've had those big companies do the work for you from that perspective. So those would be a few things that I would point to in terms of what to look at from an investment perspective.
Okay, great. Awesome, Luke. Something that I want to touch on next is, I know you have, a strong background, right? Like in terms of on like the investment side. What do you believe separates a good investor from a great investor?
I think experience is probably one of the biggest things. I mean, investors who've been through multiple cycles. I mean, at the end of the day, the commodity business is a cyclical business, and investors who've lived through multiple cycles, and we're probably seeing one of them at the moment where there's a flight to liquidity, and inevitably everything is selling off across the board, regardless of what the fundamentals of the project are. And investors who've lived through those cycles, I think is a very important thing. Having a long-term time horizon, I think, is another aspect. I mean, when you look at projects going from greenfield to production, it can be anywhere from 12 to 20 years to kind of live through that whole process. And obviously within that, you're going to see typically multiple cycles happen along the way. I think there's also a contrarian element that sometimes makes great investors. When there's blood in the water and nobody cares about a sector, that's typically the best time to be investing. when you read about, a sector on the front page of the newspaper, or to take an old adage of when the taxi driver starts talking to you about a certain commodity or sector or investment, then that's typically, the top of the market and when it's at its frothiest. When you can kind of step in when there's blood in the water and nobody else cares, it's hard to do because you don't have the same kind of momentum and, within a sector at that stage. But ultimately, that often becomes, in hindsight, the best time to invest. I mean, if we look at the oil and gas sector, for example, when oil was hitting, $10 a barrel, and Calgary was on its knees, and the sector as a whole was on its knees, that was ultimately, the best time to be stepping in and buying the sector. And since then, you've had companies go up by 5, 10, or 20 times over that same, over the last 2-year period. So again, blood in the water, and often the best investors recognize that's the point to step in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that last point, because Eric Sprott always says, you want to be in the room of the party early, right? You want to be there first, right? And you don't want to be there last. And, we obviously saw that last year, when there was a lot of talk about Bitcoin and it was playing on the radio and all that aspects, people were hopping in, right, when it was at the top. And obviously we've kind of seen in the last year that there's been a huge decline, right? So same thing for any kind of sector, but having that kind of mentality, that kind of, like you said, when there's blood in the water, is usually a really good opportunity for an investor to kind of make a move. Obviously, though, they still want to, do their due diligence and look for a good company, right? It's not just buying any, let's say, gold stock in like the commodities space. Actually doing your research, doing your due diligence, and making a good move. So Luke, something that I want to transition to next is, who are your greatest mentors, and where do you suggest that millennial investors go to better educate themselves before making any investment decision?
I think in terms of mentors, my grandfather and father have always been good or great mentors, have always kind of pushed me hard and kind of, set a tone of, wanting to be successful and ultimately earning, earning a living and career and all that kind of stuff. So they've been good mentors. I've also had great partners over the years who've, had more experience that I've had, that I've been able to ultimately learn from. So, so from that perspective, have been fortunate to always have people who've pushed me to do better, which is I think important for anyone, and being able to find those people in your life, I think is good as well. In terms of, the education piece, there's lots of kind of information online that people can get. One thing that I think could be useful is the Canadian Securities Institute in Canada. If you look that up, they provide a lot of different courses, as well as a lot of resources that are quite helpful for investors, especially investors who are looking to learn more about the sector and ultimately the basics of investing. The Canadian Securities course, that's a relatively basic course that I think, touches on a lot of different areas that, is very helpful for anyone who is looking to learn more about investing and all the different aspects of it. So that would be one area that I would point people to is the Canadian Securities Institute, in terms of a lot of the information that they provide, as well as some of the courses that you can do online, and you can even go and get different certificates and so on and so forth. But that'd be one area I'd point people to from a introductory perspective. They do have more complex courses as well, but from an introductory perspective, there's lots of good material there.
Okay, great, Luke. Awesome. Something that I want to move to next is, as you know, like the purpose of this podcast is to inspire millions of people to achieve greatness and enhance their overall personal well-being. So what is your definition of greatness?
I think at the end of the day, if someone's happy, then that's probably the greatest thing. I mean, I've spent a lot of time throughout my career with what would be described as incredibly successful people because they've made lots of money and they've become captains of industry and so on and so forth. But not all of those individuals, I think, at the end of the day, are happy. And so, some people will define becoming the CEO of a company and making lots of money and all that kind of stuff as greatness. But I think, probably the most successful people that I've come across are the ones who are captains of industry who've, risen to the top of their sectors, and also are some of the happiest people I've ever met. And ultimately also want to make all the people around them more successful and have them rise up with them and make sure that they're happy and so on and so forth. So I think that combination of, ultimately rising to the top, but once you get there, making sure that you're happy and making everybody else around you more successful and happy, I think is probably my definition of greatness.
Awesome, Luke. Yeah, no, I definitely think happiness it's definitely an ingredient that I think is very important, right? Because you want to feel good, you want to feel grounded. You also want to enjoy what you're doing, right? Whether that's in your profession or whether that's in your relationship, right? You want to be enjoying who you are. So I think you touched on a lot of good points there. And it made me actually think, especially when you brought up, the whole, it's not always about the fame or the status or the job title. When I think about some of the greatest leaders that I've ever seen, whether they do have, a job title or not, it's the ones that lead without a title, right? So they're person first mentality. And I find those leaders are usually some of those words that you said, they're usually happy. They're usually passionate about what they do. And I think those are some things that are definitely very important for someone to lead or kind of live like a great life, right? So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the aspect of confidence is the other big thing that makes great leaders, is being confident in what you know and what ultimate you can leverage off of other people knowing. And that's the other aspect that I think, again, the title, all the rest of it, but the confidence within yourself, leads to that whole aspect of being a great leader.
Absolutely. So Luke, who is a future guest that you would like to see on this show?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's a lot of good candidates. I think an interesting, area would be, some of, some of the adventurers out there who've conquered various challenges over the years. Some of those could be interesting guests to have on.
And so, Luke, where is the best place to connect with you online?
From a company perspective, have a YouTube channel. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all those different social media platforms. So I can be found on any of those. And if people are interested in following what we're doing at Newcore, then we put a lot of very good content out there that lots of investors and others find really useful. So I'd say, any of those different platforms.
Awesome, Luke. So I'll also be sure to add that to the podcast notes. And I want to take this last moment of time, Luke, to really thank you for being here. You've been pretty generous with your time. It's been a pleasure to have you on Living Your Greatness.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ben. And I wish you all the best with the podcast. It seems like you're doing great things, and it'll contribute to the success of a lot of your listeners.
Thank you for listening to the Living Your Greatness podcast. If this show has added value, please subscribe, leave a rating, and make a review. This podcast is for informational purposes only. and is not to be considered personal, legal, or investment advice or a recommendation to buy or sell securities or any other product. It is based on opinions, current events, press releases, and interviews, but is not infallible. It may contain errors, and Living Your Greatness offers no inferred or explicit warranty as to the accuracy of the information presented. If personal advice is needed, consult a qualified legal, tax, or investment professional. Do not base any investment decision on the information contained on Living Your Greatness or our videos.